Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Glad you could make it. Thank you for tuning in. Happy hump day. Um, Welcome to 17 and some change. I am EcuDes17 here to bring you my 2 cents. So I don't have um, preliminary stories. Today we're going to talk about God. Um, and I'm gonna do this kind of I'm winging it. I'm gonna do a Q&A through my friend GPT, and I haven't seen any of the questions yet, so um, it'll be kind of like off the cuff and stuff like that. And depending on if I do the topic justice or not, we'll decide on whether I touch on the subject again in future episodes. Um, Before I get started, I don't know if I'm gonna rant on this thing or bring up my my individual. I will kind of lay out my credentials real quick. Went um, I attended Catholic school growing up for uh, over a decade, from a young kid to like early teenage years. I'd say from pre-K to uh, fifth grade. Um, I did Catholic school, and and then and then I had an atheist phase in my teenage years and stuff like that. And I've read the Bible. I've read it, cover to cover, and there's a handful of stories that are, you know, that I hold on to, or that I reference, that I know and remember. Um, I'm pretty much familiar with like every quote Christ has given us in the Gospels. I don't think I could be presented with a quote from him that I've never heard before. Um, I have I have read the Quran cover to cover, just for reference, um, which is in a lot of ways a retelling of the first book, um, um, the um, the Old Testament. Um, and at least half of the book uh, presents us with the characters that are in the First Testament. And I remember at the time finding it really interesting to read about like Mary and stuff like that, and in the Quran. I was like, oh, all these characters are in here. That's pretty cool. Like, get to see like a slightly different perspective on them, and stuff like that. Um, that was really cool. Um, as far as Islam, I think the biggest tribe, I mean, the biggest thing separating them from Christianity is, the blasphemy of, in their eyes, I mean, the same grievance that the Jews have is the blasphemy of Christ, claiming to be God, and their disbelief in the resurrection, which is the latter is kind of surprising to me in regards to uh, Islam, because Islam will grant the virgin birth, but not the resurrection. And I've always been curious about kind of why that is or how that is and whatnot. Just not factual, but like just intuitively. That's never really added up to for me. Um, but yeah, and as with everything, I've heard, I don't know, dozens. I've heard, I don't want to say almost all the internet debates about God, but like I've listened to dozens upon dozens of internet debates on that topic, and yeah, and just spent countless hours of thinking about it and stuff like that, and doing my own research. Um, so it's certainly a topic that I have some capabilities of speaking on. Um, with that being said, I ran into I need to talk a little bit of shit about this product that I ran into. It was called Devil's Lettuce. It's a marijuana, and as y'all know, like I'm not anti marijuana. Actually, like I'm quite the opposite of anti marijuana. Though my views on it are kind of getting a little bit more nuanced as I grow, but um, it I don't typically like I kind of like bud, you know. Um, overall, like if you're saying overall, I'm still somebody who thinks it's a peaceful drug, you know what I mean? And I think there is space for recreational drug use in our society. Um, not abuse, but use. And you know, a weed bar and a bar are two completely different environments, and one of them, everybody's, in the latter, everybody's loud, and you walk in and you hear things clanking and clanging and changing and loud voices all over the place and stuff like that. You walk into a weed bar and it's like you just want to fall asleep. Like everybody's like half asleep. Like it's all chilling. You know what I mean? So like I think weed is a peaceful drug, and it has its place. It has its place if you will if people want to allow it. Like it can be alright. You know what I mean? But with all that being said, they have this devil's lettuce, and that doesn't do much to like battle the stigma that marijuana had as far as and that's probably they probably don't really care about that, but I don't know, man. Like the the cavalier nature of using Satan in your product, like the glorification of demonic uh, entities, and especially I don't know. I find the brand to be offensive, quite frank. Um, they got the little 5-star thing on the back, the little 5-star or 5-pointed star. Um, it says "Smoke weed, hail Satan," and it's just like, I don't know when or why people started thinking it was cool to to f with that guy. But to me there's not really much cool about it. I mean, I can see, like, I don't know where I put my notes, but oh, they're right here. I mean, are they? Yeah, I could see, like, you know maybe people want to kind of get behind the spirit of rebellion. They can feel um kind of like a camaraderie, like in touch with that rebellious spirit, particularly if they grew up um, with authoritarian types who were just arbitrary um, in their wielding of power, or worse, malevolent. Then these types of individuals could relate to the idea of rebellion uh, that goes behind Satan. I know one Satanist in real life, and that's kind of his case. He was kind of raised by cultish um, god people, and so now he's a Satanist. Right? It's that rebellion, and I don't think Satan's cool. Um, but in that context, I can understand that, and to some people, it's kind of cathartic to sit in those types of vibes. You know what I mean? The same thing with, like, horror movies. It re-triggers in a safe dosage, um, and so kind of like engaging in the um, uh, ecosphere of Satan and everything that he represents could bring that to the table for some people. Um, it's you know I don't think it's something that should be modern day Satanism. I don't know how to segue into this thought, but it is a thought that I had jotted down earlier. It was just like modern day Satanism, like the Alex Crowley brand, is it's very likened into individualism, um, which I don't throw away in its entirety. Like, there are aspects of individualism, especially once again for people who come from, like, abusive or cultic environments. There are aspects of individualism that is life saving. Right. For people who are susceptible to abuse, like, there's ideas in collectivism and there's ideas in self sacrifice that Christianity thinks that could be very dangerous to them. So I mean, I can get that. I can get that, but it's just like, you just gotta know everything. I don't mean it like that. I don't mean it like that. I just mean, like, I don't know, like, you can't just I mean, you can. Who the hell am I? I don't. There's so many competing ideologies and stuff like that. It's just like, you kind of gotta, like, understand context and see the bigger picture, and and still make your decisions based on yourself and the context and stuff like that. But I'm gonna jump into the Q&A. Like I'm blind to this. Like I haven't seen these questions, which is a little bit different than what I usually do. Um, I think last time I kind of dabbled in this, or no, last time what I did is I didn't make answers for the question prior, but I think I still looked them over if I'm remembering correctly. But I got a list here, and I'm seeing it for the first time, and let's see what we have in regards to this subject. Do you believe God exists as an external being, or do you see God as a symbolic idea? Um, while I was reading that question, I was thinking like, do I want to start off with the basics, like defining what I think God is? And I guess this question kind of does it. It says, do you see God as a external being or a symbolic idea? And I think it's um to me it's both, but I'm okay with either or. Right. If the extent of your belief of God is symbolic, I think symbolism manifests into reality anyways. And so and and that's kind of what, you know, the idea of that's one of the ideas of faith is if people are acting on these symbols, if people are acting on these beliefs, then they become real in a way. And you know, ideas become more real as they enter more minds, right? And as they're enacted. But with that being said, I'm also somebody who, you know, I guess this is bringing us back to the basics as well. Like when people ask, like, why do you believe in God? And it's like, well, there's, to me, um, somebody threw the flying spaghetti monster at me once. Like, I can tell you this flying spaghetti monster exists and there's no way to disprove it, so I could say anything exists if there's no way to disprove it. And well, to me it's a 50-50 proposition. Unlike the flying spaghetti monster, we're talking about existence. There's your evidence, and whether it was created or not. So is all of existence, was it consciously created or was it not? And there's only a yes or no there. So there's only two options in regards to that. And then we start getting into like the off the top of my head, like the symmetry argument, the perfection argument, where oh, the fine tuning argument is what it's called, where everything is too perfect, perfectly aligned, perfectly set up for there to not be a creator or a purpose, and stuff like that. Now I've had people push back on the fine tuning argument too, and they're like, "Oh, fine tuning everything, created everything perfect." I don't know if I've said this on another episode or not, but in regards to the fine tuning, argument. I've had people push back saying, well, what about tragedy? And what about, children dying and diseases and things of that nature? And I had two unique responses outside of free will because he didn't mention evil. He mentioned tragedy. And those two things are intertwined, but they could be separated because the typical objection or reasoning uh, to why God allows evil to exist is free choice. But he didn't mention evil. He mentioned catastrophe and tragedy and things like that. And so I had two thoughts on that, and the second is far more compelling than the first. Um, the first thought to that was, well, and ironically, this was a software engineer I was speaking to, and I'm like, well, you've played video games uh, before, and I don't. Has there ever been a system that doesn't glitch? I think every system ever has glitched, and maybe that's what these catastrophes are. But that's not. I don't believe that. It's not an argument that I believe in at all. Especially if you're talking about like, well, then what about a perfect? We're talking about a perfect God, so you're saying it's glitches? And no, no, no. I think it's the preservation of dichotomy. I think that if if we were all invincible, if nobody ever died, then we bro, if nobody ever died, then births would be irrelevant and insignificant. There would be no joy in a new life, and there would be no everything would be tasteless. Everything would be bland if we couldn't get hurt. If like bad things didn't happen, we would have nothing to work towards in insofar as advancing humanity or we would have nothing to work towards. And you know you need the darkness for the light to exist. And I think that dichotomy is more brilliant than we think. And there's a bigger plan at the end, and you can see that kind of when you watch humanity as a time lapse. You can see like, oh, something's going on. Like there's a story that's playing out here, and fate always is inevitable when looking at it through the rear view mirror. But um, well, that's kind of my take on that. And so how do you distinguish between faith in God and belief based on evidence? I think I was just thinking about this as I right before I started this podcast, and it's like at some point you gotta take a leap of faith. You know what I mean? At some point, you gotta take a leap of faith. Maybe not in everything. I can't say in everything. There are plenty of things that evidence is more than sufficient to say something definitively. But I love the analogy of your partner. of your monogamous partner, and like the evidence can line up and tell you like, yeah, my partner is not gonna cheat on me, like that's what all the evidence says. But at some point, that's not a fact, and you're still taking a leap of faith. And outside of those who like get like uh super like visions and stuff like that, which even then like science would try to argue those away. But like outside of that, to me it always comes down to you're putting faith one way or another. You're putting faith that there is a God, and you're putting faith that there isn't a God. And so number three, I kind of answered. It says, if God exists, why do you think He allows suffering and injustice to persist? And again, it's the evil the evil that humans do exists, uh, to allow free will, and the rest is to preserve dichotomy. That's the way I see it, and that might not be sufficient enough for you to like take the like if you're an atheist and you've been hurt by tragedy and you've lost your people and stuff like that, like hearing that might not be enough of an excuse or enough of a reason for you, right? Hearing that your brother or your mother or whoever had to perish to preserve the dichotomy of life so that other things can be beautiful, that might not be a good enough reason for you. And whatever. It's I don't I recognize that. And I mean, I'm not an evangelical. Like, I'm not trying to like get people to believe in God or whatever. Do you think belief in God is necessary for morality? Whoa, that's a good one. That's a belief in something greater than yourself. Um, I didn't think it was when I was an atheist. I used to argue that it's not necessary, and I wanted to do good from like the internalness of my heart. That was bullshit. Like I was a heathen back then. Like I didn't want to do good for society. Like doing good for society was one of like the last things on my mind. I wanted to like get in shape, and I wanted to get chicks, and I wanted to have a nice car, and I wanted to have gold, and like I wanted people to like admire me, and I liked like party music and stuff like that. And it's a conscious decision to a conscious decision to access the other part of yourself that you know wants uh wants to see some of the ideas of righteousness play out in front of you and within you. um it wasn't until I gave God and the stories in the Bible second, third, and fourth chance that I was really able to completely activate the part of me inside that was good, right? So maybe we all have a good and a bad inside of us, but without a moral compass, whether that be God or Rintin Chinchin or like any higher power. Um, it seems that then like why are you accessing the good, right? And that's the whole back and forth between the subjectivism and those who believe in you know a moral code, like a legitimate moral code that exists in the universe. And that's the thing, and that too, like you don't have to necessarily think it's God's moral code. If you recognize that the universe has a moral code, that might be suffice, you know. But yeah, it wasn't. It's not easy to access and live within the good without a conscious understanding of a higher moral order. You just there's no incentive. It's like why the fuck? Like as much good as you might have inside of you, like the incentive is completely gone. Like I mean, yeah, you like. I mean, I've always liked beauty. I've always wanted to preserve beauty and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, let's see what else we got here. Um, could a belief in God be shaped more by culture and upbringing than by objective truth? Um, more, more objective truth. I mean, from a morality standpoint, maybe, but once you get down to the nitty gritty of is everything created or not, then I mean, unless you're in one of those cultures where it's like a hive mind, you have to start like branching off at that point. Like everybody's gonna have their own common sense conclusion to that answer. Everybody's gonna have eh, their own intrinsic feeling towards accident or not accident, accident or conscious design. And I think, yeah, culture, culture can shape the upbringing and stuff like that. But everybody, I think, is gonna come down to that core fork in the road. Take out all the noise, all the extracurricular noise in regards to characters and timelines and stories and moralities. I think everybody will come to the fork of accident or conscious design. Right. All right, this section is a lot more difficult. This one, because it's getting into the nature and attributes of God, and that's a lot tougher. That's a lot tougher than the concept of a God or the existence of a God. Um, Here it says, "Do you conceive of God as personal involved in lives or impersonal, a force or principle. And I and that's like something like I'd really have to kind of wrestle with. Um, I intuitively, and from what we learn in scripture, I mean the answer is a yes. Um, and like I do subscribe in some at some level to the law of attraction. Um, I do realize the power of mantras and our ability to convince ourselves of things. And I don't know how far off that is from us communicating with the universe, communicating things into existence. I think Christ spoke to the law of attraction when he said that with a grain of a mustard grain of mustard seed, a grain of faith, one could move a mountain. I think he was speaking metaphorically to the law of attraction on that. And so, in that regard, I can see like prayer being an equivalent to meditation. You're conjuring up power from within and simultaneously working with the universe. And I think there is definitely something there, and then I think God can also be found in the ideas of truth and justice and stuff like that, you know. Um, which reminds me, truth and justice reminds me of a quote that I heard from Superman, and I was gonna bring up in regards to the uh, anti-Satanism rant. Um, and he said maybe maybe seeing the best in other people is the new punk rock and type shit, you know. Um, but yeah, see, and like number seven here, like that, I don't know, bro. Like I gotta sit on that too. Like that's a wild one. It says, if God is all powerful, can he create a stone so heavy that he cannot lift it? And that's one of those like paradoxes, dog. Like that's not a Q and A, that's a paradox, but um that he can probably, I mean, he could probably do it in a way where he can and can't lift it simultaneously. Like you think you put God in a box, like he'll create a stone where like he can't lift it, but if he doesn't want to, and he can lift it if he wants to, or he can't lift it and then he can eat spinach and then lift it. And like, bro, like God's not linear like that. Like, I don't know, you're trying to Like he's greater than time and matter and all that shit, and you're trying to like put him into a box like that. I don't. He can do whatever he wants. How do you reconcile? I got it. We're 40 minutes in. How do you reconcile God being loving with the presence of eternal punishment in some doctrines? Yeah, I don't know. I like to think of hell as a metaphorical place. I don't think it's cool that that some people. I mean, if there is an afterlife, you wouldn't want the shittiest people. But I don't know with the after, like where, like there's so much unknown with this life that like conceptualizing the moral dilemmas of an afterlife is like I don't fucking know because like he can make everybody good again and stuff like that. And you're talking about a whole new existence, a whole new playing field, a whole new moral code. You're starting all over from square one. I don't know. I always thought eternity of suffering was excessive, slightly excessive for uh, um, 80 years of shit, of bullshit. But I don't know, bro. Maybe it is justified and stuff like that. Like, I think you could have kind of toned it down a little bit, kind of made it a little bit more like whatever, whatever. But like maybe like the maybe sins and like maybe dancing with demons to the extent that some people do for a lifetime is like really egregious. Maybe there is some kind of cosmic deal where Satan's like, yeah, if I can convince them to love me more, then they'll live with me at the end. And that's the thing. If somebody's living their whole life like worshiping Satan, essentially, why the heck wouldn't they go to his house instead of God's house after they die? And then it just so happens that Satan's house is one of torture and shit like that. And then I don't know, you think the masochists like that shit? You think there's a ton of masochists out there that are like, ha, I can't wait to freaking go to hell and be bent and get you know um but yeah. um do you think God changes over time, or is he timeless and unchanging? I mean, in the Old Testament he changes his mind a lot. He sounds very human in that regard in the Old Testament, and I don't know. uh, is God best understood as transcendent beyond the world or immanent within the world? Both? Like, both? All right. Um, Section 3. If science can increasingly explain the universe, what space remains for God? And we touched on that. They can explain how, but they can't explain why. They just show you the mechanisms of of the creator. Um, God uses the minds uh, for consciousness. Um, and so whatever science says, you could just say, yeah, God did it. So I don't see um, the Big Bang. Yeah, that was God. You know what I mean? Like whatever science says, you could say, God, yep, God did it. So I don't. I think there'll always be a God of the gaps, so to speak, as well. Which that's not exactly what I was just saying. That's not what I was just talking about. But I think in addition, there'll always be a God of the gaps. You know, there'll always be, they'll always find space for the unknown. I played a video game one time. I think it was Mass Effect Andromeda. I could be wrong, but they were like super advanced, and there were like alien civilizations all over the world and stuff like that. And one of the aliens was still struggling with the idea of God. It was still curious, like, is there a God and stuff like that. And so I don't think no matter how advanced we get, we're always gonna wonder. Just like I've said many times in this podcast, like accident or intentional. You know, am I an accident? That's awesome. Um, how do you respond to the claim that religion is primarily a tool of social control? Um, I think they've used the idea that religion is a primary tool for multiple things. I think it was primarily a tool for control, but it was also a tool for to create docileness, and it was all, which is one and the same, but it's also a tool to provide comfort for people. Like people have said, humans created it so that they can comfort themselves. People say it was created as a tool to explain the unexplained. So there's multiple reasons that people think it was created. Um, I think it's a series of stories and ideas that have proven over hundreds of generations to contain the most wisdom. Um, and then this kind of goes, if other religions also claim truth, why should your understanding of God be more valid than theirs? This is something that I wanted to do for a long time, and and I might maybe I should do that soonish. Um, I've wanted for a long time now to do kind of a deep dive comparison into all the world religions, as far as and find all the points of intersection, all the places in which the religions agree with each other and have it presented in a nice way. um I think there seems to be truth in a lot of religions. And that is a problem that you find in philosophy as well. Like any philosophical stance that you take, there's a just about any philosophical stance that you take, there's a counter stance to it. And so that's a problem in philosophy. But I think there's an intersection in religion where you start to get to the idea that, I mean, is there a religion outside of I mean, I don't even think Satanism says suffering is bad. Is there like a religion? Well, Christianity kind of says suffering is good. But like, is there a religion that says like the suffering of innocent people is a net force for good? Like is there a religion that says murder is okay and stuff like that? Do not all religions say like thievery is bad? Uh, this is something I gotta go back at. 14 I already touched on, which is God's necessity in in explaining morality. Um, Prayers go unanswered, and that is what it is. It's not for you. Um, Now this is the last section here. Um, this is personal conception and implications. What image or metaphor of God feels most real to you and why that image? What image or metaphor of God feels, I don't know. I don't know. The thing the S that's wild. I mean, the idea that we're created with a purpose, like I've touched on, that feels really real to me. That feels like I can't I've been an atheist, but I can't understand, like it doesn't feel right. It feels like this was all created, and there's a rhyme and a reason um to it. But another thing that feels real to me, um in a way that is outside of religion but still in the esoteric space. It's kind of a an epiphany that came to me um, on psychedelics once upon a time, um, and it was a shared consciousness. The idea that we are all sharing one consciousness, and the exact quote that I formulated in that state was, um, consciousness is the universe, and the universe is consciousness. But the idea of a shared consciousness really resonates. Do I know how that ties into religion? I know that Christ tells us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and that doesn't mean intertwine yourself with toxic people, but maybe that speaks to the interconnectivity of all of us that feels real. I um when I had that experience, I was able to conjure up images of people in my mind, and I and I would go through these people, and each person that came to my mind, I would witness them like experience every human emotion possible within like within a minute's time, within like a fraction of a minute, they would go through the entire emotional wheel, and like I would feel that shit like with them, and like there felt like there was like zero difference between that person and myself at the time, regardless of who it was. Like, like I would like acquaintances would come to my mind, and I would just see them jubilous, and I would see them suffering, and I would see them angry, and I would see them, content, and I would just feel like all these things. And so, yeah, no, I think we have a connected consciousness. Um, do you think your concept of do you think your concept of God influences your self concept and values? Yeah, I think I touched on that also. My morality kind of changed um once I started giving uh more credence to these ideas. Um I think there's three more questions here. The last one is tough. But a good one to leave off on, I guess. I am All right, so if you found out tomorrow that God does not exist, how would your life change? Wow, I mean that's a deep personal one. Damn, like I found out God doesn't exist tomorrow, how would my life change? I've told people like, we were just talking about the reasons that religion was invented in the first place, and one of them was to like make people feel better, to like coddle people. But like it could be freeing. It could be very freeing. Like if God doesn't exist, that means there's no moral judge. If God doesn't exist, that means I can go like like I can do whatever the hell I want, bro. Like I can indulge in as much like I could just indulge, like I could just do mad sex like all over the place, and like doesn't even matter, like just for fun or whatever. And like who cares? Like I mean gluttonous, like you put on weight and stuff like that. Um but just the fact that we see consequences like on our body points to a god. You know what I mean? Like you smoke, you get fucking black lungs. Like just those consequences like points to the idea of a higher order. But yeah, no, I just be like at times it would feel a little bit more freeing, I guess. But like I know God is a judge, but it's not really like you don't mind having a judge you don't mind having the concept of a judge hanging over your shoulder when like you agree with the judge. You feel me? But yeah, I don't know. I guess it would open up a little bit more freedom for me to be a heathen. But like I said, if you like God, you don't want to do that shit anyways. Um, but if I found out like for sure that he didn't exist, then that's different. I think I'm just kind of giving lip service to it, because like if you actually find that shit out, like for sure, like definitively, like how you gonna say that though, Sway? You know what I mean? Like how you gonna? Yeah. Do you see God more of as a creator, a judge, a companion, or something else? I think I kind of just spoke to that a little bit. Everything, all the things. Last one. It says, ultimately, do you believe God needs humanity or does humanity need God? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Do I think God needs humanity, bro? Like, no, like God, because you said like, oh, if he doesn't need humanity, then why did he create humanity? Because he wanted to. God has wants, not needs. Okay, God just needs you to behave. But no, like, I don't know. I think we probably need God more than God needs us. Just by kind of us, kind of like God. I don't know. I think he might get a little bored or something. I think he'd be doing. I think he could. You know, he might have mad other. He might have. That's a crazy thing too. Like thinking about that. Like he could have tons of other civilizations, but like Fermi paradox. If you believe that we are the only like civilization in the universe, we are the only like conscious planet, then like what? That's a mathematical impossibility. So like if we are inhabited all over the place, then you could still say, well, God still could exist. God still could be the grand organizing, he but if we are the only advanced species, we are the only conscious planet, then what the hell? That's definitely a God thing. Like that's definitely not a coincidence. You feel me? So like there's that on the Fermi. Well, that's not really the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox is like if like where are they type shit. But yeah, like either way, if like I said, if there's other lives out there, we can say God created them too. But if there isn't, it's like no, that's way too much of a coincidence for us to be the only ones. But anyways, I think that's. I mean, I don't think that's the extent of. And I may or may not come back to this topic in the future. I think this topic is kind of infused in a lot of different things, anyways, that we talk about and stuff like that. But I thank you guys for showing up, for listening, and God willing, we do this again next week, okay? Goodbye.